What's up, everyone? We are back at Blockchain for Social Justice. We are now sitting down with Faris Oweis.
How you doing?
Thanks for coming on the show, man.
No, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. All right, and we are going to talk about Digital Town.
Awesome.
Let's do it. Chief Investigator of Digital Town.
Instigator,
Chief
actually.
Instigator.
Yes, and that will make sense in a second, actually.
Let's do it. Chief Instigator.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, Digital Town itself, what we do is we help people search, connect, and then transact directly with local merchants and one another, all in an effort to keep more money in local economies. Then we leverage blockchain smart contracts to share ownership of these city portals directly with citizens. So it's basically shared ownership for shared community success on a global scale.
Yeah, so this is interesting because it almost seems as though we're becoming more reliant on the major conglomerates that deliver us what we need really fast. And it's a little bit more difficult for us to find the mom and paws around us.
Yeah. So actually, that's where the instigator part comes in.
Yeah, tell us about this.
What you're kind of referencing is kind of known as the extraction economy, right? So these extractive internet platforms, they have brands associated with them, like whether that be Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, you name it. Over time, when it all starts out, like day one, it's all good. You have a service, you get a service like Uber. You want to go from point A to point B, right? But over time, there's a tipping point where the utility for the driver, for example, goes down, and the experience for people like me and you either stays the same or increases significantly, right? And this exists across all the different platforms, right? And it all comes down to how they take money in, right? So when you have growth capital comes in, that growth capital is for the express intent, right, of creating shareholder value, which typically comes at the expense of human prosperity, right? So there's nothing illegal about what they're doing, but if we have 100 startups right here, right, and I give $1 million to each startup, typically with this growth capital, the expectation is that 99 will fail, but at least one will have to be 100x, 1000x, right? So that's actually right down the road. Why you see like Twitter, for example. Twitter had a wonderful, wonderful business, right? Or has one, right? It helped people communicate. It was the defining moment of Arab Spring, for example, right? But every time they have their quarterly report, Wall Street just absolutely desecrates them, right? Because even though they produce, let's say, $500 million in revenue, it's not enough for all the growth capital that they took in. That's why I have to find ways to extract more value and more money from its users. So, whatever the case, each vertical has its own dominant player that basically has the master switch to our lives. And what has happened is they've managed to consolidate value in the form of money, but also data, which they can then resell to the highest bidder. So it's basically the sharing economy was this really like amazing promise, right? It's going to redefine how we work. But in reality, it accelerated an existing business model where we just more rapidly sold our time and managed to basically work more for less.
Okay, so the extraction economy is the way that you're calling it. That's so interesting. So rather than Amazon maybe figuring out how to empower the hundreds of thousands of small business owners that exist across the world or across the earth or across even just the US, let's say, that rather it was how does Amazon deliver their goods to the individual within 30 minutes via drone. That kind of became the essence rather than the other way. Now if Amazon becomes like a benign, benevolent entity, then it's almost like, okay, that's fine as long as I guess the hundreds of thousands of small business owners still have some sort of work and some sort of purpose, some sort of meaning that they can find. Then isn't it okay then if Amazon does that? And then what is the significance of these super tight-knit digital towns?
Yeah, so basically, let's just take a hardware store, for example, just every day. Something broke at your home, you have to go get a hammer or something, right? You look up a hardware store on Google, let's say, right? You'll find the hardware store, right? Joe's hardware store, whatever it is in your community. Or you have some lovely bookstore in your town. You'll find the bookstore. Search for the product. You'll find the product on Amazon. You'll find it on Target. You'll find it on Home Depot. You'll find it on some big player versus that of the local merchant.
It's totally true. Yeah.
And what's the significance of that? The significance of that is, let's say you buy... let's say it's the book example, right? Let's say you buy, 4 books for $100 USD, right? Your local bookstore has those books, right? But it's actually just not convenient enough for you to procure those books from that bookstore, although it's a stone's throw away from you, right? So for the same $100, Amazon takes around 22%. So what that means is that $22 or $100 that could have gone into your community now goes to Amazon, right? And that 88, so 100 minus the 22%, then gets distributed to wherever that book may have come from. Maybe it's a dealer in Tulsa, Oklahoma, whatever, right?
The same thing's applicable for if I buy it through the bookstore, then they keep $22 and the other
even better.
78 goes to.
It goes much more far-reaching than that. So when you keep money locally, you improve the velocity of money, right? That's the key.
Okay, the velocity of money.
So what
in your community.
In your community. So let's say just 10 people decide to just enact on what I just proposed, right? It's $1,000, right? Would you say within a mile of us, there's probably opportunity for people looking for $1,000 worth of stuff?
Yeah.
Right. But the reason that there's no opportunity for them because there's not enough money in the system to meet that opportunity, right? So that's why, like for an Amazon, for example, I think it's like 10 million in revenue of retail that's produced within a town through local business creates, I think, 48 jobs. Every 10 million on Amazon within that community creates 4, right? So because the money is being consolidated and that money is being transferred into share price, which we're all a part of, right? So people, you own it, mutual funds, we're all part of it. So the crux of this is how capitalism just works. It's not a crime. It's just how capitalism works. You take in growth capital, you need to produce 100x, you need to find some ways to extract value to meet that 100x and convert that meaning into share price. And that exists across any vertical. So the whole idea, and where blockchain can be, paramount, is in a decentralized format, right? You can have an Uber, but you would own the Uber, right? So it's not just it turns from a cloud hosted solution that's funded by growth capital to extract value to you become part of a cooperative movement where you are not selling your time to the product, you're selling your value, right? That's the key. It's selling time versus selling value versus selling time. And this isn't some far-fetched, crazy thing. We actually started out like this, right? So, like after the Crusades, there were bazaars, right? People came back from the Crusades. They were exposed to all different types of cultures and cool stuff, right? And they basically went from peasant to middle class by trading their value, right? They had market monies, right? So, like you made wine, I had shoes. We made it work. Mm-hmm. We circulated through the bazaar.
Bazaars used to be fucking cool.
They still could be, and that's why we're talking about it, right? Yeah. So we're trying to get back to that sense of coolness, and not just cool, it worked for everybody. People created value, right? So, but what happened was every time even today, manage to create value between us, we inherently take away value from someone up top, right? So in the bazaar time, when we created value between one another, we got significantly richer, but aristocrats got relatively poor. Right? Mm-hmm. So this is how central currencies came about, how corporations were formed. So literally overnight, we went from trading our value to you were in a certain vertical, I was in a certain vertical, where I had to actually then sell my time because kings established corporations and we had to funnel everything through them, right? Mm-hmm. So blockchain's if we can see it manifest in the way it's intended, it could be so instrumental to how community, because you know what also happened back then? People saw a future, right? We weren't waiting on our cities or the federal government or whatever to get money to do things, right? We believed in what we were doing so much because we were creating so much value when we see this keep going that we invested in our cities. That's why you see like so many churches they got built, town squares they got built, right? All these things that we now look at as, mm-hmm. archaic, mm-hmm. Monuments it was actually a symbolism of people believing in brighter futures within their communities, right?
Okay, so there's for every how much money? $20 million?
So just as an example,
what was the money amount?
Yeah, so every 10 million.
Every 10 million. So for every $10 million spent within the local community, 48 jobs are created.
Exactly.
And with every $10 million spent by Amazon or to Amazon, 4 jobs are created.
Because you have fulfillment centers, and it's just not to kind of rain in the parade on Amazon. It's like,
but this is a really good example. Yeah. But there's also another part of this, the point that's crucial, which is that when you look at the bazaar example, that people were exchanging value between each other.
Yeah.
And that was taking away from a centralized entity, such as an aristocrat or what have you.
Because you have to imagine, these people never really had to make money, right?
Yeah, they were just exchanging whatever they produced for those other items.
No, but the aristocrats, like, it's quite feudal, right? So they basically sat around for a very long period of time, not really have to worry about it. So all of a sudden, as someone threatened their way of accumulating wealth, that became a problem.
That became a problem, right? Yeah. So now the essence of continuing to exchange value between one another has kind of been put to the side by the simplicity and the ease of accessing those resources that we need via a conglomerate.
So a couple of things happen there, right? So, like, let's just take Uber, for example, right? We get an Uber, right? I'll give you an example. I was in a Lyft, actually, yesterday. Great guy. His name's Rami, right? He just moved here from Egypt. Stellar dude. This guy missed his flight in Sacramento, so he drove a guy literally from Sacramento to San Francisco, airport to airport. That ride was 120 USD. Rami took home 68 USD, right? So that delta.
How's that possible?
That's what the rate was.
That's no longer like 20% or even 30%.
So basically,
that's
and
almost 50%.
So it's just a different feature of extraction, right? There's surge pricing that we're all familiar with, right? These are just ways, because basically there's predictive analytics around this.
They can't
right?
take that much money.
It's the algorithm economy, right? So like, even let's say, for example, let's say my wife and I, we go to work every day, right? And let's say I take an Uber every day, right? I take a Uber share, right? Pool, right? They will know that is my pattern.
Totally.
Right? My wife doesn't, right? So knowing that it's my pattern, they will charge me more. So if I literally had my wife just book the same Uber, she'll get charged less because they don't know her as a pattern yet, right?
Yeah.
So these are all just features to extract more, to again convert that into share price, right? So actually, where were we on that?
So, the point was about the exchanging value between each other versus with the conglomerate.
Yeah. So with like the Amazons of the world or whatever, they're just doing a more advanced form of something that already existed, right? They're no different, right? It's just highly digitalized and much faster, right? So it's literally the only difference. And what happens is, as they all start out, the money that we give them every time we book a ride or book a product, right, that goes into two main areas, right? Either marketing. At first it goes into marketing, because the more that they can acquire more of the supply chain, the more influence they can have over it, right? And then once they have enough of a supply chain, then they invest it into technologies to streamline everything operationally, right?
Yep.
So everything becomes increasingly harder to get away from. They have our loyalty, right? So like in the smart city space, this is what I'm championing to cities all around the world, that for too long, cities have advocated the online economy to players that not only they have no incentive to reinvest that consolidation of wealth and value back into the communities that create it, right? So I've been literally going around the world. And so this is probably the instigator part. I know it was the first question and we went to something else, but the instigator part is the coolest part of the job, because what I found was that no matter what color you are, how you speak, what you look like, we're all impacted by this extraction economy in a very real way, but we're very disconnected from one another in terms of experiencing it. And as we experience it, in our communities, whether we see homelessness or lack of affordable housing or, whatever the visual pain is, we tend not to attach it to what these platforms have done and the wealth that they've extracted out of the communities that reduce our resilience to such things, right? So this extraction economy is actually the underpinning of a lot of and this is why I talk to a lot of foundations that are focused on, certain things, right? It's the underpinning of the challenges that we see and the widening gap between the haves and have-nots. San Francisco, being a prime example. It's tough to look at, a lot.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the 100K a year engineers on the same streets as the dying homeless people. Yeah. And we also talk a lot about the class-based speciation that could be occurring due to exacerbation of wealth inequality right now.
Because it's not just commerce, it's also culture. People tend not to talk about that. Over time, right? Because the incentive model is that the platforms are stronger, the more disconnected we are with one another, right? That means in turn, we turn our dependence and loyalty to them.
And
right?
rather than on each other.
So, that's why actually I love traveling to Europe. I love going to Italy and Portugal, because you can just sit there and look, people still get together, right? That's how we used to hug it out, right? Yeah. We used to get together, talk about our problems. We used to talk about it in coordination with our local governments that we elected into power. This is how it worked, right? But now, where things are so, to your point, where things are so easy and convenient, it's a habit-forming experience. So basically what Digital Town is trying to do is make local a habit-forming experience. Because, our bet is that people's human nature is to support their local community and support one another. However, it needs to be at a price point and convenience level where they can actually act on it, right? And that takes buy-in from a few actors.
What does that require? If I can get the hammer delivered to me via drone in 30 minutes, how would I get to a hardware store and back and pay the same amount for that hammer?
Yeah, so this is where blockchain comes into, quite handy, right? So we kind of look at this ecosystem as, okay, what company does this? What company does that? How's it going to get to me, right? Sometimes it's all under one banner, just Amazon, and they work with a bunch of people. But there's no reason. Let's say you're trying to get this hammer, right, from the hardware store. So you're searching for a hammer, right? You basically, the front page of Google is like beachfront property, okay? But like the real world, not everyone can afford beachfront property. So that's why you see Home Depots over Joe's hardware store in my mock example. It's not that Joe doesn't want to be seen, that Joe is priced out of being seen, right? So what if you had a model where you can't be seen first just because you have more money? And then as you search for a hammer, let's say you live in San Francisco, I'm not sure if we own the domain. Let's say you live in Austin, because I know we own that domain, austin.city, because that's our organizing framework. So we own over 23,000 .city domains, right? So it's an organizing framework for navigating city services.
Cool.
So Austin.city, Nashville.city, Tokyo.city. 50 cities around the world have their own domain, so we work with them. .London, .Miami, 2,000 more in the application process, all looking to create a more intuitive, smarter web where people can more easily directly navigate to these things, right?
Yeah.
So in this example, if you search for a hammer, instead of seeing like Home Depot first, Amazon second, Target second, you would see Joe's hardware store and his inventory right there.
Because you're searching based on proximity to you and
you're searching in your city, and you're searching for a specific product that maybe Joe's hardware store has, or maybe Alfredo has. Mm-hmm. Alfredo may have Alfredo's the camera person here. So
he's our teammate. Yeah,
he's part of the team.
Yeah.
So maybe Alfredo lives like 5 blocks away, and he's trying to sell a hammer, right? So he would also be seen over Amazons of the world and so forth, right? Not to say the Amazons don't have a product to sell, but if you are presented with the option, literally on the same page, where you can direct your transaction at a similar price point.
How would this actually work out? I would go to Austin.city and conduct a search there for an item.
You conduct a search. Joe's hardware store would show up. That hammer would there.
Proximity to me. It's a couple blocks away, hopefully.
Yep.
I can take 10 minutes to walk there.
Or, not that it's existing yet, but we're finding more local partnerships as we have users on the platform.
Deliver to me?
Yeah, because you actually don't need a service. There might be a kid, 18 years old, that's trying to make a couple bucks that could deliver it for you, right?
Okay,
but you need trust.
How's the price of the hammer the same price as Amazon?
So that's another thing. So the price of the hammer would, if you can negate some of the logistic factors that these local businesses are encountered with, if you if you deduct that from the equation, it actually ends up being quite consistent with the pricing that you see, right? But they have to account for a lot more things where Amazon has economies of scale, right? So in a local network, right, the cost actually ends up. I can't go product by product across global inventory, but it would be much more closer, and then also more convenient given that it's local, right? So you can add more convenience to justify maybe maybe slightly cost.
Okay, maybe. Okay, but I still
some will be lower, some will be because these, like, for example, if you go like not even online,
if you paid an extra $1 or $2 and you actually knew that you were supporting your local economy, people could buy into that as well.
But that's the other thing, though. They're actually earning on it. So this is why
they're earning on it as well. That's a good way to look at it. Is you're contributing to the local economy, which then contributes to you.
Exactly.
Then the small business around you can decrease their prices more. They can get more product lines. They can get faster deliveries to you.
You're the chief instigator now.
This is good. You've been teaching me. I like it.
So cool. What we call it is city shares. So city shares are basically, it's a brand name for a smart contract, right? It's just the brand that we give for a smart contract. So let's say I lived in Austin, I would be faris.austin.city. That'd be my permanent digital address. On a wallet that hosts my digital address, so my permanent digital identity, where I accrue my reputation based on civic behavior, which also basically gets tethered with different local deals based on my civic behavior. And also over 16 fiat currencies and multiple cryptos coming within the wallet, where peer-to-peer, it's free. Brick and mortar, it's free. Online, as you search for that hammer, there'll be a small fee across verticals, right? But then that fee, whatever it is, gets shared with the community. So yourself and your other city share owners within the community. So what you have are self-sustaining cities that are economically resilient, cooperating with all the other ones. So it doesn't matter that you maybe not want to take the time to know your counterpart in Jakarta, Indonesia, that's experiencing the same exact thing you are. But now you're inherently connected with one another on a platform that is unified, but federated. So the difference between us and let's say like an Uber is unified, but it's centralized. Digital Town, by design, as a design principle, is unified, but federated. So the owner operators and community leaders that we bring on board and evangelists that we bring on board. Federated means each city is its own entity, right? That is just connected with other ones, right?
So it's like a node on a decentralized network.
Yeah, exactly. So Austin.city is a node on the network, Nashville.city, Tokyo.city.
And you have your own domain because you live in Austin.
Exactly.
So, but if you move to New York, you get a new domain.
Yeah, you could sell so basically there's a marketplace.
Sell your old domain and get a new domain because you
your
live
city
in the
shares.
new city.
So
you sell your city shares.
Yeah.
So okay, all right. So you've accumulated city shares by
being a resident of your city, and let's say you move
purchasing local.
Yep.
And you accrue with your wallet filled with fiat and cryptocurrencies. You accrue more city shares every time you purchase things.
So you have the option of accruing more city shares, but each citizen, so in every city, it's 10 times the population. So if you have 1 million people, it's a finite number. So that would be 10 million city shares.
10 million city shares. So each citizen gets 10 shares.
Yes, right? Now
they have to register with like a government ID?
Yeah, so there's different attestations and things like that over time that we add as security layers, right? But as a legal, so we have basically technology that enables us to basically identification match, right? So there's different like technology partnerships that we've created, like Life ID is an identity partner that we have. We work with other vendors that are basically have been far along on this identity journey than we have, right? So
you have to sell your shares when you move out of the city because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a marketplace.
There's a forced sell.
Yeah, so you put your city shares on the market. So there's a marketplace for you.
But you have to. You can't keep Austin city shares when you move to Tokyo.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then.
But you're entitled to Tokyo shares when you go there.
When you go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then there has to be some way for if there were only 10 million shares created for 1 million people, then and if their population's growing now, there's 1.1 million people. Then how do you increase?
Yeah. So we work off
shares?
the most recent. So we basically aggregate the most recent population data, and the closer relationships we have with local governments, the better we can actually quantify that number, and we just simply have to adjust.
Okay.
So we're only as good as the data that we're fed, right?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So this has been a good lesson in how we can build together a stronger social fabric within our communities via technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrencies and community building and just different ways of looking at the way that we structure political and economic systems. You were teaching me a bit about HQ2 as well, which was really interesting. It was like where Amazon's building their next HQ, and initially I was like, is it Denver or Austin? Because I thought those were the two places they were talking about it. But then you were like, actually, what's really interesting about it is that all of the cities that applied for HQ2 that Amazon turned down, Amazon told them what they didn't have in their infrastructure to make it actually a viable place for them to move to. And so then those cities turned around and were like, crap, like what are all these things that we don't do yet? Like, let's go and do these things that in order for us to actually be able to become a next level, next generation city that's ready for this stuff. I thought that was really interesting. Kind of ties together with what you're just teaching.
Yeah, for sure. Because the whole point is to like, basically, there's a tremendous amount of smart people coming out with a tremendous amount of decentralized technology, right? But if we can't come together and figure out how to basically embed this decentralized technology with a decentralized work structure, you're basically going to have sharing economy 2.0, and the power curve will be far too great for us to overcome. Like honestly, it'll be just far too powerful, right? So this is what I keep on basically championing. And people will just listen to who has the strongest voice. So right now, Amazon has a very powerful voice and a lot of influence. Because why? Because they've accumulated so much power. Have they accumulated power through wealth and data, right? So when when all these cities are kind of applying for Amazon HQ2, they basically, it was very secretive, one. B, only people really involved with the city and real estate developers. No really city participation, right? Or from a civic standpoint. And then basically they made proposals where they basically gave up so much in terms of like incentives, like we'll offer you more, and we'll give you this, and some cities even willing to change their name, right? Out of I don't know how many applied, but like many did, many lost, right? There's only probably like 2 to 5 that are still left in the running, right? So they went to all the different ones that were left and saying, like you said, this is why you didn't win, because you're not Amazon ready. So how these cities interpret this is like, okay, we need to be like this, right? Okay, this is how we're going to survive the future. And I think that the point is not to try to basically work towards a future they say you want. The point is to figure out what kind of future you want for your people and work backwards, right? So I think that we've kind of fallen victim to this theory that we need to, like we open Wired magazine and Fast Company and we see Zuckerberg and Musk, and we're screwed unless we let them shepherd us into the future, a future they want. We need drones, we need this, we need that. When in reality, I think to a certain extent, these cities need to kind of look at their people and like, okay, what kind of future do we want to create together? How are we going to kind of reharness the level of connection we once had while still adopting digital tools to be efficient at it, right? And work backwards from there. Right now, I think it's very, this power player saying this,
totally,
about face, change it. Because in reality, these cities don't all have to be a Silicon Valley, right?
It's equally important for those global leaders to be propelling whatever they want to build, whatever future they want to build, because they're very inspirational in building it in usually fairly benevolent ways, but also for the communities to still be having conversation about what they want to see, what they want to build, how they want to do that, kind of at the same time. And then interestingly enough, all of a sudden, if an economy was starting to stay really hyper local and hyper community oriented, one could actually see a community become like a next generation city, a local economy there that is really strong. Like there's a couple of these shops that do a bunch of different things, and then a couple of shops do these different things, and people only access those shops. They have really great delivery speeds, and that further stimulates the economy. I mean, that is a very interesting ideal vision for like a Gen 2.0 city that is not having to be dictated by the major conglomerates downwards. Yeah,
because these cities each city has a social fabric that makes them special, right? And that's why it's just a social organism that makes them special, right? So if you're good at like Detroit with cars, obviously, Des Moines, Iowa with just be good at what you're good at, and then feed into a system where that kind of goodness can then translate into human prosperity, right? Versus, okay, if we don't do this quick change to become this like new tech hub, right? Because inevitably everyone's going to try to race to be a tech hub. There's always going to be someone who has more developers than you, people that have more money than you, people that have more something than you, right? If you're all trying to chase the same thing. But if you have certain companies that are dominant in these vertical spaces, that's actually what they need. They need you all racing to the end outcome they're looking to achieve, right? Because they're already in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
So it's just something to be wary of, and it's something that I'm, on this video and around the world advocating for.
This seems pretty important for social justice as well, just because of the ability for a community to really leapfrog in terms of its, rather than having a dependency on a conglomerate, that even a low SES community leveraging these local community processes could leapfrog and become that city 2.0 faster. I have a couple quick questions that I want to ask you. Yeah. You were touching on this a little bit. It's kind of the principle of that, although the bottom of the SES in the world is slowly coming up, the top is being exacerbated by exponential technology much faster, rising much faster. Yeah, what do you think about that?
So I think a couple things. I think every time you have like an emerging technology, it usually reaches the places that need it most last. And why is that? Whenever there's an emerging technology, corporations typically see that as a new product suite to monetize, right?
Yeah.
And typically they have assets, and they go where their customers are, right? So these are major hubs, right? It's all one equation: amount of business development dollars, new product. It's a P&L statement, basically, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you see these emerging technologies reach developing countries last because the prospective buyer for them, as dictated by the organizations that shuttle them into institutions, are more incentivized to stick with where they know and where they have assets, right? And I think it's just it's a matter of, because no matter what the technology is, if it's fed through a corporate code and corporate construct, it will operate as such, right? If you put apples in it, if you put oranges in it, if you put bananas in it, it just becomes fruit that goes into the system, right?
How does the corporate client look at the new technology and think about it as both the suite of tech for passing along to the highest SES, but also to the lowest SES at the same time?
So yeah, I think, and this my personal opinion, I think that obviously, like, let's just use blockchain as an example, because it's a prominent example. There are certain aspects of blockchain that are very valuable to large corporations in terms of how they sell stuff. So like the immutable nature of data, for example, that's huge, right? How they can offer that now to their whole supply chains, right? But I think when they think about it, right, they need to they see it as a journey, right? They map it all out. This is development. This is sales. This is there's multiple departments in this. And I think they think about it, okay, we can be global with this, but to be global, to prove it out, you need to start where, you can probably prospect where you find most of your sales, right? So they actually need the early adopters, which usually hail in massive urban centers that we're accustomed to, first to basically fund initiatives that get it out, right? So it becomes really kind of a second tier. But probably part of the plan, I would say, because the people that work within these organizations are wonderful people. They want to do, global good, but they work within a construct that incentivizes certain behaviors for certain purposes at certain times. So it's just something to be wary of. So like a lot of my work with like the United Nations is, literally for that purpose, where it's to make sure that, these type, like for example, it's funny when, we're talking about like emerging technologies and the new thing, we forget how we felt about the old things when they were first new, right? Would that be internet or sharing economy? Like internet was supposed to start out as a way to like transfer knowledge between government and academia, right? And then private sector basically said, oh, this is a really interesting social organism. Let's try that out, right? And then you have the internet, what it is today, which basically pulls on every of our heartstrings to buy stuff, right? And then you still have, and then you have sharing economy, which is the same thing, but you have people working longer for less. And massive amounts of humanity has never seen any things, never experienced any of these things, right? Yep. So I think that's all just a byproduct of who shuttles these technologies into our life, what their incentive is, where they get money from, and what they're tasked to do with that money. In most cases, a corporation, almost all cases, a corporation is tasked with taking in money, believing in a certain product suite, getting that product into the market, using those profits to expand, to scale that solution. And typically that happens in places that are more willing to buy, that have more capital, which does not include...
Max my shareholder.
Exactly. Yep. So which does
not include low SES, because they can't afford the products usually.
Because blockchain doesn't eliminate capitalism, right? It's a technology layer that
augments it.
Yeah.
Yeah, blockchain augments capitalism. Okay, couple quick speed rounds. Do you think we're alone in the cosmos?
Is that a typical question you ask? Alone in the cosmos? No, I don't. I think a lot of people that you've had on this podcast on this video would probably say no as well, because I think that you find that there's a lot of people that may not be as readily known as some others in the world that are championing some other ideals and ideologies, but there's many of us out there, right? So I think we have a pretty huge community.
Do you think we're in a simulation?
Funny enough, I think we are in a place where we are trying to make sense of a simulation and make it more prosperous for everybody. So there's nothing wrong with being within a simulation. We just need a simulation that creates more win-wins for everybody involved. And we're all trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to do that? Digital Town doing its part, and many others around the world.
What do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
When two people that have no reason to like each other and have a predisposition towards one another can get together and humanity takes over and they see the common good within each other.
Beautifully said.
Thanks.
Let's find those cosmic brothers and sisters as soon
Let's
as
do
possible.
it.
Yeah. And thanks for what you're building with Digital Town. Thanks for teaching us about it today.
Thanks for listening. And thanks everybody for listening.
I think it's a way of seeing the world from more of a, people are saying less tribalism, but at the same time, less tribalism doesn't actually always mean less community. And so we can have more community within this tribe and not have it be a bad thing, and still have these tribes engage and interact fairly with each other, but focusing on a community first and increasing kind of the efficacy, the efficiency, the speed, the love, the care, the economics across a community can actually potentially be better than having it all be dictated from a top-down perspective. So I just find that so fascinating. It's great to have learned that from you and have shared it today. Let's see, we'll have link in bio for Digital Town. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you guys had a good time, definitely give your comment below. We'd love to hear from you. We would love for you subscribed and joined us. If you guys found this content useful, not only share it with other people, don't just consume, but go create. So make a video about it, write about it, do your thing, tell 2 people. Go tell 2 people about it, they'll tell 2 people. Let's go do that. Also join us on Patreon so we can continue doing great things like coming out to the Blockchain for Social Justice Conference and continue highlighting really smart people around the world. Thank you very much for tuning in. Much love.